And then, of course, there's housing, and which ties in with a lot of these issues, because we know that the lack of affordability of housing, the housing crisis that we have because of long-term, in my view, bad housing policies in California, anti-housing policies, policies that basically say it's not a priority to have enough housing for everyone. That is the number one driver of poverty. That it drives families into poverty, it drives children into poverty, it drives people into homelessness. 5% of school children in the state of California are homeless, are living in cars, living in hotels, living in homeless shelters, and they're expected to go to school and learn. And San Francisco is along those lines. We have, I believe, 2,200 school children in San Francisco Unified who are homeless. We know that working young families are being pushed out, are having to move, whether it's 2 hours away, so that they have to spend 3-4 hours a day commuting and spewing carbon into the atmosphere and messing up their health and not spending time with their kids and showing up at work, tired and grouchy. And we're creating a system where young people are struggling to get a foothold and be able to aspire to be stable in a community and to perhaps start a family. And it's not just San Francisco. San Francisco is we're the tip of the spear in a bad way on housing, the extremity of the crisis here, but it is all over the state, not just in coastal areas, inland. Areas that used to be considered very affordable are no longer considered affordable. You may have seen in the Chronicle or in the SACB this morning, there was an article about teachers. We all want to pay teachers more, but one of the biggest obstacles that teachers face in terms of staying in a community is the cost of housing. And they had these maps. I posted this on social media this morning, where you can click on every county and see, in terms of the average teacher's salary for that county, what percentage of their salary will go to either rent or purchasing a home. For a teacher to purchase a home, the cost would be 115% of their salary every year spent on that mortgage. And rent is like 70%. But it's bad everywhere. So we have to tackle this issue, and it's really hard because it means doing things differently. And so I have a bill that has generated a lot of conversation. Senate Bill 50, which was the successor to Senate Bill 827 last year. And that bill will address what is one of the foundational problems that we have in California. We have a 3.5 million home deficit in California, which is equal to the deficit of the other 49 states combined. And there are a lot of reasons for that deficit, but one of the reasons is that through highly restrictive, low-density zoning, primarily single-family home zoning, near jobs, near public transportation, we are banning housing. When you have low-density zoning, it means that it's illegal to build any kind of housing other than a single-family home. So it's not about getting rid of single-family homes. I grew up in a single-family home. It's great. But we have made it illegal to build anything else. You can't even build, in San Francisco, on 70% of the land in San Francisco, it's illegal to build anything other than a single-family home or a 2-unit building. It means even if you want to build a 4 or 6 or 8 unit building, it's illegal. It used to be legal. If you walk around even the Richmond or the Sunset or the Castro or Noe Valley, you can see some of these apartment buildings, 6, 8, 10, 15, 20 unit buildings. They were built in the 20s and 30s up until the 60s. And then in the 70s, we banned them. And these are a lot of our rent-controlled housing stock. And then we decided as a city that we no longer wanted those small to mid-sized apartment buildings. And so we banned them and said you can't build anything other than a single family or maybe 2 or maybe 3 units. And that's 70% of the land mass of San Francisco. That's job center, transit center, a place where it costs, the average rent is now over $3,000 a month. LA, same thing, 70%. Statewide, 75% of the residentially zoned land in the state of California, it's illegal to build anything other than a single-family home. You can't even build a 3 or 4 unit small apartment building. And when you ban apartment buildings, what that means is you're also banning affordable housing, because no one builds affordable below-market rate single-family homes or even 2-unit buildings. You need to have a scale of multi-unit. So when communities, and there are communities in California that ban everything except single family, they're banning affordable housing. So what we're trying to do is not to say there should no longer be local control on housing. As we know, I'm a former local elected official, I'm board supervisor, I was president of my neighborhood association. I think far more often than not, local decision-making is superior to state decision-making. But local control is not biblical. Local control is a good thing when it delivers good results. And on housing, we've had an extreme version of local control where cities have been allowed to do whatever they want. And even if there are state rules, they're ignored or toothless. And that has helped to accumulate this massive housing deficit that is resulting in evictions and displacement and homelessness and young families and young people being pushed out and so on and so forth. So the bill will set standards around zoning and say that if you are in or near a job center, if you are adjacent or accessible to public transportation, you can't ban apartment buildings. You can't ban affordable housing. You have to allow these small to mid-sized apartment buildings. We've listened to feedback on the bill. The original version last year included an 8-story option, which we removed from the bill. It's causing a lot of anxiety. We took that out. The bill also mostly respects local height limits, except for around fixed rail. Around buses and job centers, local height limits, local setbacks, local design standards, local inclusionary, local impact fees all apply. So we really have tried to listen to constructive feedback and made some modifications. But we know it's a hard bill, and there's no doubt about it, but zoning reform is an important conversation. We're also working to try to really move the dial on homelessness, and it means two things. It means really funding permanent supportive housing so that people can, because that's the ultimate solution to homelessness, is having homes. But we also know that there's over 100,000 people who are on the streets of California on any given night, and about 15,000 of them are youth. And so we have to have a better system of emergency shelter. Not as a final goal, but as a transition to get people stable off the streets and on the path to housing. And there are big swaths of California, including entire counties, that have 0 shelter beds. Entire counties with 0 shelter beds. Others have shelters, but they're only open in the winter, or it's a tiny number, or they have nothing for youth. 2/3 of California counties have 0 youth-specific homeless programs. So I have a bill, Senate Bill 48, where we're going to try to set, first of all, better geographic equity for shelter and better standards for shelter. Start moving California towards the navigation center model, where people with less strict rules, where people can bring their pets or be with their partner, bring their belongings in, because the traditional shelter model, let's just say, is not very welcoming to people. So some people don't want to access it. And so we're doing that work. And again, that is important as well, but we're committed to it. Regarding the PG&E bankruptcy,
Thank you very much for coming.
and I'll repeat the question, so if you don't hear.
Thank you very much for coming. I wonder if you could, I want the 70% in Richmond if you live in a single family home,
Yeah.
which is an issue that concerns a lot of us. I have 2 questions. Could you explain in more detail how SB 50 would impact, with what SB 50 has to compete with SB 50, and how those would impact zoning in San Francisco?
Sure, can everyone hear? Okay, so the question was specific to the Richmond, how SB 50 would affect zoning in the Richmond.
San Francisco.
I'm sorry, in San Francisco. It does impact zoning in San Francisco. There are big swaths of San Francisco where it would not impact, because there are a lot of parts of San Francisco now that do not have density limits, especially on the eastern side of the city. And the presumptive height limit in San Francisco, I think in the vast majority of the city, other than the high-rise areas and a few West Twin Peaks neighborhood, the standard height limit in San Francisco is 40 feet. And so SB 50, for anywhere, so the bill applies geographically if you're within a quarter mile of a high-frequency bus stop, which in San Francisco, we have high-frequency bus stops. Because thankfully we have a robust bus system that runs 7 days a week, morning, night, and often 24 hours. If you're within half a mile of a fixed rail stop, then, I'm sorry, If you're within a quarter mile of a high-frequency bus stop or a half a mile of a fixed route stop, the bill would say that the city cannot limit density. And what that means, limiting density, is you can't say we're capping the number of units. You can only do a single-family home or 2 or 3 units here. And then fixed rail would trigger potentially a height increase that you can't push the height limit below either 45 or 55 feet, 4 to 5 stories. So if you are triggered by a height of a bus, triggered by a high frequency bus stop, which would be the case in Richmond and in much of the city, the local height limit would apply. So you wouldn't be able to build higher than typically 40 feet. But for example, with a 40-foot height limit, instead of saying you are limited to a single family home or a 2 or 3 unit building, with a 40-foot height limit, you could do, let's say, 4 flats or maybe 2 flats per level. So you would see some of these small apartment buildings that used to get built everywhere in San Francisco, including in the Richmond, be able to come back. Even with fixed rail, because the standard height limit in San Francisco is 4 stories, that height under the bill is either 4 or 5 stories, so it would be either a 0, no height increase, or at the most 1 story. And so in San Francisco, even though geographically, because we have so much transit, when you look at the map, it's like, wow, there's all this impact geographically to the bulk of the city. The reality is that because we already have a lot of density, and because our height limit is not like a 20-foot height limit like it is in some cities, we already have 40-foot, it's not as dramatic an impact in terms of individual projects. The other thing that's important to keep in mind about the bill, A, completely respects local demolition controls. So in a place like San Francisco, where we have very, very tight demolition controls, it is exceptionally hard to get a demolition permit for sound housing. That would not be touched. And the bill, in addition to any local demolition controls, imposes additional demolition controls that if a unit, whether it's a single-family home or apartment building, has been occupied by a renter in the last 7 years, it cannot be demolished under this bill, even if the local law allows it. And if there has been an Ellis Act eviction on the property in the last 15 years, the bill cannot be used in terms of getting a demolition permit, even if local law allows it. So we put pretty tight tenant demolition protections in, which we negotiated with tenant affordable housing advocates. Those are very, very strong protections in terms of the number of years. And we've been criticized, saying your controls on demolition are too tight. So that's why people are, entitled to their views. So that's an overview of the impact. One thing I also say, and this is, it's interesting on these issues. I think sometimes people on both sides of the argument have a perception that, okay, the governor signs a bill like this into law, and then tomorrow, all of a sudden we look up and there are these apartment buildings like descending from the sky, like spaceships, and they just land and everything. And on the supporter side, they want that. Like, we want the housing like tomorrow. And then on people who are maybe not so supportive are concerned, oh my God, tomorrow my neighborhood's going to be revolutionized. And the reality is, when it comes to development, nothing moves fast. And so for supporters, that's very frustrating because it can take years and years and years. And for opponents, I would say that this is not an overnight kind of thing. Especially in a place that is largely built out, you have to have an available parcel. You have to have a developer who has funding. This doesn't change the approval process. So if there's a conditional use required or discretionary review or going through the planning process, that'll all still happen. And so this is a gradual, over time change, which again, some people will be happy about, some people will be frustrated about. Yes?